wildlife. The local wildlife. Alright, bro amigos, welcome to the 13th installment of the FEC Friday. This week I decided to head south instead of north. I went down to New Smyrna Beach because I wanted to catch the 202 coming across Spruce Creek. Here I am at the Spruce Creek Bridge, counting all the lures that are stuck on this power line, which kind of shows you the lack of situational awareness. Apparently a lot of the fishermen in this area have, but in fairness to them, that is really low-hanging power line, so I really don't know who to blame there, but either way, it was kind of humorous seeing all the lures on the power line. The only thing I ended up catching in an hour and a half that I waited here was this local wildlife. A.K.A. the homeless guy. He apparently just came out of a bush on the north side of the bridge, which kind of surprised me, and I don't know where he was going, but luckily for him, there was no trains coming at this point. And so I sat there in boredom, ended up watching some hose draggers running hot to probably a cat stuck in a tree. I'm just kidding. I love you firefighters, even if I make fun of y'all. Anyways, after sitting here for about an hour and a half, I said I'd make my way down to the New Smyrna Beach yard to see if I could catch anything there. And my luck would change there, and there was actually, I believe it was going to be local 910 doing some yard work. And I did catch some conductor rookies playing in the yard. And before we get to them, I did spot GP40-2 number 419 to be sitting on the team track heading towards the back shops. And this locomotive was built for the FEC in October of 1979. Here's a photo of it brand new. You can see it still had the barricade stripes as well as the pile Ostratrol triple warning light. Unfortunately, it does not have those anymore. And it's obviously been repainted since then. But it is nice to see that the FEC holds on to veteran locomotives for such a long time. And then we can hear the horn of GP40-2 number 411 as it's about to come around these Ortner hopper cars as it's building its train for the day. So GP40-2 number 411 is also a homegrown, or as they say over here, flow-grown FEC locomotive. It was built for the FEC in November of 1972, which means it's probably one of the first Dash 2 locomotives out there. And so to see that it's still working here over 53 years later is pretty neat. Now, obviously, you can see that this one sports a different paint scheme than 419. I don't know exactly what you call this paint scheme. I know the ones with the actual hurricane on the side is the going places scheme. This one's kind of a mixture of both because it's got the hurricane logo on the front, but then it's got Florida East Coast spelled out in this type of font. And as you can see, 419 has a different shade of blue. Also has the hurricane logo on the front, but it has a different font style for Florida East Coast. So anyone who knows what this paint scheme is called, please let me know. I am actually curious. And then as you can see in the background, now you can see the rookie conductor class out there. They are about to head over to 419 and be taught what a locomotive is. I'm just kidding. I don't know what they're actually being taught that day, but they are about to head towards that locomotive. And I have some footage of that later on. And I do believe this is the rookie conductor class because I actually did apply for this class. Unfortunately, I didn't get a call back. So FEC, if you're watching, hire me. So anyways, while the baby conductors go learn what a locomotive is, we will continue to watch the crew of 910 use locomotive 411 to switch the yard, build the train, and continue their work for the day. So for those of you who are familiar with the FEC uses train numbers or train jobs instead of actually symbols like the Class 1s. So, and it's actually fairly organized. So southbound trains are normally odd numbers. So for example, you'll have 105, 107, those are southbound mainline freights. And just like you'll have 202, 204, 206, which are mainly northbound mainline freights. But this also applies with locals. Now, most of the locals are numbered in the 900s. Now, the local out of Jacksonville that runs south towards Bunnell is 905. If you've seen any of my other videos, I've stalked them quite a bit. I'm obviously giving them a breather this week or this month, whatever you want to call it. And so now I'm stalking 910 for this episode. Now, 910 is based out of New Smyrna Beach Yard and usually runs north. It usually services Port Orange, Daytona Beach, Ormond Beach. They will run up to Favoretta, but that's really just a runaround siding. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll leave cars there, and 905, which normally runs to Bunnell, will come a little further south to Favoretta, and they'll pick up the cars there. So if there's something that needs to go further north than Ormond Beach, then 910 will take it and leave it at the Favoretta siding, or it's also called the Harwood siding. And then 905, once it's done servicing like the Vulcan, Argos material plants and the Sunbelt chemical plant in Bunnell, it can run down and pick up what 910 left off. So pretty easy to follow. Now I've had some conflicting reports on whether 915 is also based out of New Smyrna Beach or if it's based out of City Point. I'll have to do some more research on that, but I believe 915 is also based out of New Smyrna, and which I would think makes sense with the numbering strategy, because 915 runs south and it's an odd number. But I've also seen some sources where it says it's based out of City Point and it runs north of New Smyrna and is a turn. But I am not exactly sure on that information, so take it for what it is. Take it as a grain of salt. If anyone has any clarification on that, please let me know. Like I said, I'm not exactly familiar with this side of the territory. This is a little further south than I normally go. But anyways, as you can see, the baby conductors are boarding 419, and locomotive 414 makes a brief appearance. This is the normal power that I've seen on 910, but today it was on the RIP track or the maintenance track. I don't know if it's just down for its 90-day inspection or if it's got some other routine maintenance it's got to do. But we will see that locomotive later on, actually on 910. But for today, 910 is using 411. And now you get to witness FEC doing a brief foray back into the passenger rail service, as it's got all the baby conductors on 419. It's a one locomotive passenger train. So watch out, Amtrak. FEC is coming for your business, and it's probably already more reliable and actually on time. So as we watch the FEC's baby conductor passenger train disappear into the oblivion behind that tree, we also get to see that 910 has returned from the south end of the yard with some more cars to add to its train. As I mentioned before, GP40-2 414 is the normal power for 910. However, today it's using 411, which is another GP40-2, so it really doesn't make any much difference. But the reason I bring that up is because New Smyrna Beach is actually the main maintenance area for all the locomotives. So both road and local locomotives all get serviced here, whether it's like 90-day inspections or minor repairs, or even major overhauls occur here. I think they also have a paint shop here. So for those of you who are still butthurt about the champion scheme going away, this is where the dirty deed is being done. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the champion scheme, so put your pitchforks down and your torches down. I'm not saying I don't like the champion scheme, but I Florida East Coast has a lot of pretty cool paint schemes. Like this one's pretty cool. The retro blue is pretty cool. I even like the Faro East Coast scheme. I know it looks like the blue version of the Grupo Mexico scheme or the Faro Mex scheme. And I know a lot of people are still up in arms about that. But, like, I don't know. I guess as a guy who grew up with Union Pacific and how they obliterated all their merger partner identities, like, at least Faro Mex is allowing Florida East Coast to still be Florida East Coast and not, like, Faro Mex U.S. edition, or, as they say in Mexico, you know, Faro Mex Estados Unidos. So, guys, it can always be worse. Like, don't get me wrong, the Champion paint scheme is awesome. We're actually about to see an SD40-2 here. Maybe in a few minutes. Oh, probably like 15 minutes, because we have a lot of switching to go through. But anyways, we do get to see a Champion paint scheme SD40-2 rolling through when 202 comes in through the yard. But, and I get the Champion paint scheme is awesome. But, like I said, it could always be worse, guys. Like, with these mega mergers and now, like, UP's trying to buy NS. And now, don't get me wrong, you'll still see NS locomotives for probably, like, 30 more years. Because it's going to take years and years and years to paint them all. Like I said, at least Faro Mex is allowed Florida East Coast to be Florida East Coast. And not, like, just some Faro Mex US edition. But anyways, that's a different rant for a different video for a different day. We're not going to get into the weeds on that on this video, because this video is about admiring and enjoying the FEC's local action and just FEC stuff. So anyways, now you can see that 910's brought some lumber cars up from the south end of the yard. It's going to do some more switching, some more rearranging of the cars. Like I said, it's building its local train that's going to service later on. The Orner hopper cars that you will see, which are those blue and silver cars to the platforms, we will see those later on in the video. So these cars right here, we'll see those later on in the video. Right now you can see that they're loaded, but we will see them, I catch 910 pulling them out of the customer's industrial lead, which is Halifax Paving. We'll catch them pulling those empties out later on in the video. But as of right now, 910 still has a bunch of work around the yard. So I will be quiet now and let you enjoy the sights and sounds of yard switching. So this would be the final switching movement that I would capture of 910 working the yard, as it was about time for me to start heading home to get ready for work. But before I could pack up and do so, I heard the distinct horn of an ES-44 in the distance, and to my surprise, I ended up looking down the tracks and saw a northbound 202 entering the south end of the yard. So with 202 having a SD40-2 in the champion scheme in tow, and me naturally having a unhealthy obsession with SD40-2s and any standard cab EMD in general, I naturally had to try to get another shot of it, and so I tried to go to one of my spots in Ormond Beach. However, I was not able to make it to the crossing in time, so this dash cam shot will have to do for now. So the next day on my way to work, I realized I had a few minutes extra to spare, so I stopped by the Halifax Paving Industrial Lead in Ormond Beach to try to set up and catch the southbound 105. And luckily for me, they were pretty punctual today, so I was able to get a catch of them coming past before I had to leave for work. Yeah, buddy, we're back to stocking 910 again. So, and this time 414's on the front again. So all is right in the world. And so we're going to watch as they service a couple customers here in Ormond Beach. And so first, in order for them to do so, they have to drop their loads on the southern end of hardwood siding because both spurs are facing south and they're one way in, one way out. So what 910 ends up doing on these days when they service these customers is they'll take their loads and they'll run obviously short hood forward. They will take the siding at hardwood, drop their loads at the southern end of the siding, unhook, continue north on the hardwood siding up to Favoretta, where they'll get back on the main, wait for the switch to be thrown, head back south on the main, come back to the south switch, wait for the switch to be thrown again, hook up back up to the loads, and then they'll come back and start servicing these customers. This location is one of the customers. I don't know if it's a separate company or if it's part of the Halifax Paving company. I was not able to find any information on the address. It's pretty suspiciously blank. So if anyone knows if this is actually part of Halifax or if it's its own customer, please let me know. I've not been able to find any documentation. But anyways, here we can see 910 coming under the I-95 bridge with its loads now on the opposite side of the locomotive. And so he'll stop here shortly, use the loads to pull out the empties, and then he'll shove the loads back in, and then he'll proceed about a half mile south and begin servicing the Halifax Paving Company. So unfortunately, the spur right here is pretty hard to film without trespassing or without a drone. And unfortunately, I don't have a drone and I don't feel like getting arrested. So I decided that I wasn't even going to try to film that spur, and I would go down to Halifax Paving and set up there and wait for 910 there, as I knew he was going to be servicing them next. And here, as you can see, here's the backside of Halifax Paving Company. It is a pretty big operation. So as you can see, they have a lot of materials, and you can see this big old Hitachi excavator turning big rock into small rock. And from what I read about them, they are a family-owned and operated business that grew up in this area. It started back in 1955 with the grandfather starting the business and doing dirt work. They eventually expanded into road work and patching, and now they have branched into airport runways and stuff like that. So they have a lot of business and they move a lot of material. So as you can see, they do take a lot of cars in from the FEC. And fun fact, these cars that we're looking at right now were the exact same cut of cars that I filmed at the beginning of the video. That scene was filmed 2 days ago, and so as you can see, they are already ready to be picked up 2 days later. So you can imagine the amount of material that comes in and out of this facility.